Maya knew the system was about to crash, not the servers, but the illusion that this place gave a damn about anything other than image and IPO dreams. The office smelled like kombucha farts and overpriced ambition. She sat in her usual glass box corner, headphones on, pushing a hotfix live that patched a major security flaw caused by the guy who just got promoted. Meanwhile, that same guy, Derek, the new CTO, was up front doing a whiteboard TED talk about disruptive scalability like he invented recursion. Her code was the backbone of this place. Every login, every transaction, every fancy widget dancing on the front end hers. Not that you'd know it from the Slack channels, where Derek got emojis and fire reacts for copy-pasting her functions with two variables renamed. Maya didn't need applause, but damn, even janitors got more credit. She used to care. She used to dream. Now she just kept the lights on, quietly, elegantly, like a ghost that debugged itself. The company was flying, Series B money rolling in, articles in TechCrunch, influencers fake using their product on TikTok. And yet, nobody knew her name. In stand-ups, Derek would say things like we built this while avoiding eye contact with the one person who literally architected the platform. At lunch, interns quoted her comments from old pull requests like gospel, not realizing she was the woman microwaving lentil soup beside them. And look, while I've got you here, 97% of you beautiful freeloaders listen to these stories without hitting the subscribe button. I'm not mad, just disappointed. Help me hit my first 10,000 subs, and I'll promise not to cry into my cereal about the algorithm. Deal? All right, back to the code apocalypse. Maya had a ritual. She'd log in every morning before anyone else, run the CI checks, drink her tea in peace, and reread one section of her old project, her code, the one she started building in the quiet of her one-bedroom apartment before any of this startup glitz ever called. It was elegant, modular, deeply human. She'd poured herself into it like it was a diary disguised as Python. When the founders hired her, they didn't even know they were onboarding a working prototype, better than their whole dev team's combined caffeine output. The bastardization came slowly. First, they asked her to port her own functions into the corporate repo. Then Derek streamlined the architecture by copy-pasting her authentication logic and slapping a comment on top that read Derek's token handler v2. That was the moment she realized she wasn't a team member. She was a resource. Very expensive hammer for someone else's nail. She didn't speak up. No one does in San Francisco until their stock options vest. Instead, she created boundaries. Not loud ones, subtle ones. She never deleted her old Git repo. She never merged her most delicate code, the heartbeat routines, the trust protocols, the security validators, into the master branch without layering it through her own verification modules first. Not because she planned revenge. Not then, but because something in her always knew. This didn't belong to them. Derek was the final straw, the shiny-haired MBA who called himself technical because he once learned what Docker was. He'd saunter into her space with his overpriced espresso and say things like, I think we need to refactor your logic so it's more enterprise-friendly, which was tech bro for I don't understand your work, so I'm going to slap jargon on it until it breaks. Broke her patience instead. By the time Derek scheduled that alignment meeting on a Friday at 4:30 p.m., his favorite ambush hour, Meyer already had something stirring inside her. Not rage, not fear, just calculation, the quiet math of inevitability, like watching a glacier slide toward a tourist lodge and wondering how long until it hits. She wasn't angry. She was tired. Tired of building scaffolding for fools who'd climb it and spit down. And somewhere in the corner of her repo, tucked deep inside the old modules she never ported over, sat a line of dormant code. Waiting. The conference room smelled like stale La Croix and Derek's cologne, something aggressively named like Alpha Drift or Founder Musk. Maya stepped in with a notebook and a stomach full of dread. Derek was already seated, leaning back like a CEO in a stock photo, arms spread wide as if he were about to baptize her into some new cult of disruption. The projector displayed a meaningless slide that said Team Alignment, Vision 2025 in Comic Sans. God help us. He didn't even offer her a seat before launching in. So, Derek said, dragging out the word like a villain twisting his mustache, just wanted to align on expectations, Maya. With the new direction we're heading, I need to make sure everyone's on the same page. Especially you, given your contributions. He said contributions like it was a dirty word. Like she handed out snacks, not built the entire backend from scratch. Maya sat down slowly. Okay. Derek smiled with his veneers, teeth too white to trust. Just a quick reminder, legally speaking, we own everything you create here. All of it, even the lunch code. He laughed. Maya didn't. Neither did the intern awkwardly pretending to check HDMI cables in the corner. Derek leaned forward. I mean, you've done great work, he said, emphasizing you like he was tossing a bone. But let's not pretend this product wasn't a group effort, a team effort, and just so we're clear, your contract gives us total IP control. That includes anything you've improved since starting, even if you started it before. That last sentence snapped like a trap closing. She blinked, just once. Derek smiled wider. Anyway, keep up the good work, all right. Just don't go rogue on me. Then he chuckled again, as if that were some kind of inside joke they shared. That was it. 5 minutes of power flexing dressed up as a check-in. When she left the room, her hands weren't shaking. Her heart wasn't racing, but something shifted, something cracked loose and started turning. She didn't speak to anyone on the way back to her desk. She logged in. She opened the logs. She stared at lines of code that had been touched, mangled, renamed without credit. And then she opened her repo, the original one, the personal one, the sacred ground. The project born out of long nights, takeout containers, and jazz playlists during COVID lockdowns. She hadn't touched it in over a year, but there it was, humming like an old engine still full of gas. They own everything you create here. Sure, here, but that kill switch, that trust validator that Derek never understood but insisted on simplifying, that wasn't born here. That code had a digital birth certificate timestamped 14 months before she ever signed an NDA. She leaned back, staring at the signature line in the module she wrote when she still believed in clean design and clean intentions. Hash written by Meyer R. 2017. Do not deploy without private cert. That cert still lived on a USB drive taped inside the battery compartment of her smoke detector at home. She smiled, faintly. It wasn't revenge yet, but it wasn't forgiveness either. It was math. Cold, clean, and inevitable. Because Derek was wrong about one thing, she wasn't just a coder. She was the architect, and she was done letting tourists build shrines out of her blueprints. The first thing she did was Google tech intellectual property termination clauses like it was going to whisper a way out. 45 minutes and 2 panic bagels later, Maya realized the truth. They'd sewn the contract up tighter than a Silicon Valley founder's ego. Clause after clause of legal thickets, all designed to make sure if you so much as sneezed an idea during work hours, the company got to frame it and hang it in the lobby. She stared at the screen, her inbox pinging with the usual avalanche of Jira tickets and meaningless buzzword campaigns. One email from HR even had the subject line, "Friendly reminder, everything you code belongs to us," with the damn smiley face. She didn't know whether to laugh or puke. She called Priya first, her old college roommate turned startup burnout whisperer. "Girl, don't do anything dumb," Priya said while the sound of a toddler shrieking in the background hinted at real-life chaos. "Just take your payout, update the resume, and go somewhere they don't reward assholes." "Where's that, Mars? Funny." "Seriously, Maya, you got options, you're brilliant, doesn't matter. They own everything I made while I was there." Priya paused. "While you were there," that's the key phrase. That thought lingered like a ghost in her living room as she sat cross-legged on the rug that night, laptop on the coffee table, tea gone cold. She clicked into the folder she hadn't opened in almost 2 years. The original repo. The one she used to dream about licensing one day. The one she stopped developing the day she signed that contract and traded vision for a salary. The files opened like old letters from a version of herself who still had idealism in her blood. The architecture was clunky compared to her recent work, naive in places, overly ambitious in others, but the bones were good. The soul of it still thumped under the syntax. She scrolled to the security module. The kill switch was primitive, less of a nuke and more of a well-timed sneeze into the system's open mouth, but it worked. The logic was elegant. If the signature didn't verify through her private cert, access to core logic collapsed into a fail-safe loop. Anyone else would just think it was a bug in a legacy branch, but she would know. She always would. She double-checked the timestamps. April 4, 2017. Modified, July 23, 2019. Last commit 1 week before her first Zoom interview. Her lips curled. Not a full smile, more like a private smirk shared with the screen. They couldn't take this from her, not the timestamps, not the original schema, not the elegant middle finger quietly embedded in the code like a digital relic. Her phone buzzed, another message from Derek on Slack. "Need you to review the new login branch." "It's urgent." She didn't reply. She closed the laptop. She didn't know what she was going to do yet. But for the first time in weeks, she didn't feel like a replaceable cog. She felt like a loaded gun waiting on a crooked table. The best revenge wasn't loud. It was precise. She hadn't spoken to Professor Ellison in 3 years, not since graduation, not since the honorary lunch where she'd promised to keep in touch and then promptly vanished into the San Francisco grind like every other overworked prodigy. Some people never fade from your mental speed dial. He picked up on the second ring. "Is it done blowing up yet?" he said, skipping greetings. His voice was just as gravelly and warm as she remembered, like a vinyl record left out in the sun. "You always call when it's either broken or about to break." Maya smiled despite herself. "I need to ask you something about code ownership." There was a pause. Then the familiar creak of his office chair. "Ah, so it has blown up." She told him everything, well, most of it. She left out the parts about the kill switch and the private cert. But she laid bare the manipulation, the dismissal, Derek's smug speech about owning everything. She could hear him exhale through his nose, sharp and slow. "Let me ask you this," he said. "Where did that code begin?" "My apartment, my MacBook, 2 years before the job." "Exactly. Ownership is where the code begins, Maya, not where it ends." He let the silence hang just long enough for her brain to catch up. "They can't retroactively own your thoughts, your logic, not if it predates them. The moment they signed you, they bought what came after, not what you carried in. But my contract send it." She did. 10 minutes later, she watched his tracked changes come back like war paint. paragraphs highlighted, one section circled in red. All intellectual property developed during the period of employment and directly pertaining to company projects shall be the sole property of the company. See that? He said. The phrase during the period of employment. That's your salvation. That's your line in the sand. Maya stared at it, that plain sentence hiding all the power she thought she'd lost. You built the bones before they even knew your name, he added. They don't own the skeleton. It just stapled skin on it. That night, she pulled everything up again. Not in VS Code this time, but on paper. Literally. She printed out her original schemas, flowcharts, security logic trees. She scribbled notes in the margins like she was back in Algorithms 101. Somewhere in the nesting dolls of her old modules was a subroutine she hadn't touched in years. Verify owner key. She remembered writing it while eating instant noodles, laughing at the idea anyone else would ever even try to understand it. It was a dormant module, left inactive in the original core, not critical to runtime, not visible to API calls. Just sitting there like a ghost in the wall, waiting to whisper who built this? To anyone who asked, she tested it, quietly, locally, it worked. She updated the parameters. Instead of a static response, it now referenced a key from a private cert, cross-verified with a hash generated only by her original builder token. Anyone without that token wouldn't just get rejected, they'd get looped into a decoy environment with false data. It would look like a glitch. Debugging it would be like chasing smoke through mirrors. She reread Derek's last Slack message, still sitting there unread, bold and annoying. She didn't reply. Instead, she wrote a new note to herself and taped it to the edge of her monitor. Ownership is where it began. Then she opened the codebase clone they were still using and smiled. They never even saw the module. It happened on a Tuesday, because of course it did. Tuesdays were Derek's favorite for firing people, far enough from Monday to avoid suspicion, close enough to Friday to let the PR team spin it before the weekend. The calendar invite was titled Quick Check-In, and it hit her inbox with the urgency of a snake curled in a mailbox. She knew what it was before she even opened the link. When she entered the conference room, Derek was already there. HR was there too, flanked by a woman Maya had never seen before, probably one of those off-brand consultants flown in to make bad decisions look procedural. Derek didn't look up from his iPad. Hey Maya, thanks for joining on short notice. She sat down, hands folded, posture calm. Inside, her pulse had gone cold. Been reviewing team output and overall cohesion, he said, like he was reading off a dinner receipt. And we've noticed a misalignment in execution and philosophy. He always used the word philosophy when he didn't have real metrics. It was the corporate version of calling someone difficult for not laughing at your jokes. HR chimed in. This isn't about any single incident, it's about overall fit. These things happen. Startups evolve. Maya didn't blink. I see. I'll be deactivating your accounts as of now, Derek said, finally looking her in the eye like he wanted a reaction. You'll receive your final paycheck and equity summary via email. We've arranged for someone from facilities to walk you out. She nodded, slow and deliberate, very efficient. He leaned back, visibly annoyed that she wasn't crying or flipping a desk. As she stood, she caught her reflection in the dark glass of the office wall, still, small, unshaken. The image of someone who'd seen this storm coming months ago and had already built the ark. The walk back to her desk was clinical, cold, like the office was shedding her like dead skin. Her keycard beeped red when she tried to enter the dev server room. Her Slack disconnected mid-message. The monitors around her continued to hum, unaware that they'd just lost the only person who actually knew how to keep them alive. She grabbed her laptop from her locker. Not the company one, her real one. The one with the original repo. The one that still had sticker residue from a forgotten music festival and a crack across the lid from when she dropped it during a fire drill in 2019. It felt like holding a weapon wrapped in nostalgia. The receptionist, a kid named Jamie who still believed in office birthdays and team bonding, looked up nervously as she passed. You okay? He whispered. Aya paused just long enough to lean in and murmur, don't update anything until Monday. Then she walked out, past the kombucha fridge, the indoor bike rack, and the glass trophy case filled with tech awards won on the back of her invisible labor. Outside, the San Francisco air hit her like a reset button, foggy, indifferent, clean. She didn't cry. She didn't rage. She just stood there for a moment, watching the reflection of the company logo in the lobby glass twist and distort with each passing car. 2 weeks. That's when the product was scheduled to launch. A flashy livestream, big investor names, promises of innovation and scale. 2 weeks. And without her cert key, without the dormant validator she'd quietly embedded into the bones of their clone system, without the original logic she never truly surrendered, that launch would be dead on arrival. Wrapped in tinsel. Screaming into the void, she walked to the corner and flagged a rideshare, humming softly under her breath. She wasn't fired, she was free. Maya didn't sleep the night she was fired. She didn't try. She made tea she didn't drink, turned on music she didn't hear, and sat in front of her laptop like a surgeon prepping for quiet revenge surgery. No adrenaline, just clean, deliberate focus. At 2:14 a.m., she uploaded the key. Not to her laptop, not to any local device. She stored it on a remote, encrypted cloud instance, air-gapped, buried behind a nested VPN structure she'd built back in grad school during a cybersecurity elective she took for fun. The key had one purpose: to verify ownership. Without it, their system would keep functioning just fine until a very specific trigger was pulled. And that trigger, it wasn't a button. It wasn't a bomb. It was a moment, a precise, calculated interaction path that only happened during a live demo. A new feature Derek had insisted on fast-tracking. A beautiful, bloated, animation-heavy feature that called on the one part of her codebase nobody fully understood: the heartbeat check. She built it years ago to silently verify backend integrity. Derek thought it was legacy fluff and never removed it because, frankly, he was too lazy to trace its dependencies. But it was still there, still checking, still waiting. If the demo team accessed that feature live, on the same dev environment they cloned from her branch, the validator would activate. It would look for her key, and when it didn't find it, it would fail silently. Then not so silently. She left no fingerprints, no breadcrumbs. Everything had been documented years ago. It was her logic, her system. They cloned it, they bragged about it. They never questioned how it was still running so smoothly despite laying off the only person who knew what failsoft logic inheritance even meant. The same week, Derek started doing interviews. TechCrunch, Business Insider, some crypto bro podcast that sounded like it was recorded in a converted Tesla trunk. She was good, he said, always with that backhanded praise. She wrote solid code, don't get me wrong. But at the end of the day, Maya was just a coder, not a visionary, not someone who could scale with the company's future. The podcaster asked something about innovation culture, and Derek launched into a sermon about streamlining talent and detaching ego from code. Maya watched it with one eyebrow raised, sipping chamomile like it was champagne. She screen recorded the whole interview and bookmarked the timestamp. Just a coder. She messaged Priya with the link. Priya, you want me to set his apartment on fire or just unplug his Wi-Fi forever? Maya, nah, got it covered. She spent the next 3 nights double-checking her fail-safe paths. Nothing malicious, nothing traceable. Just a validator that required a key they didn't have. Without it, certain encrypted variables would refuse to decrypt, cascading subtle but unavoidable bugs through the runtime. They could spin it as a glitch. They could blame QA. But they couldn't blame her. Not when the logic predated her contract, and the deployment logs pointed back to the cloned structure of her old sandbox environment. They didn't even bother renaming the internal branches. One still bore the label, MyRoot Legacy v4. She'd stared at that branch name during a random GitHub scan the day after her firing, when she realized they hadn't even wiped her references. They weren't just using her work. They were running their entire launch build on her personal skeleton. She logged out, closed the lid, and whispered to the dark, "Good luck with that, Derek, 1 week out." The startup socials were on fire. The new product demo was being teased like it was the second coming of sliced bread wrapped in blockchain. Biggest step forward in real-time data pipelines, Derek claimed in a LinkedIn post, complete with a photo of him standing on stage next to a looping slide deck full of buzzwords and Maya's handiwork. Except it wasn't his handiwork, it was hers. Maya watched from the sidelines, quietly the same way she'd watched from her corner desk for 5 long years. Only now the desk was gone. The badge was dead. But the blueprint, the skeleton under their glossy UI, that was still hers. Every commit, every function, every nested exception clause. It wrapped her architecture in marketing glitter and called it new. But Maya knew it was the same machine, same fragile engine, still tethered to the validator she wrote, still waiting for a key they didn't possess. That validator was like a ghost in the floorboards, quiet, patient, utterly merciless. The trap was already set, and then the email came. Subject line, all proprietary assets accounted for final compliance confirmation. No greeting, no warmth, just a PDF attachment and a passive-aggressive footnote. This serves as formal notice that all intellectual property previously associated with your employment has been cataloged and secured. No further action is required. She read it twice. Then again, it wasn't a declaration, it was a dare. Meyer opened the PDF and scanned for the lines she knew they'd get wrong. Sure enough, there it was, an internal asset summary listing every module, script, and subroutine by date of deployment. Every one of them falling neatly after her official hire date. Except the architecture wasn't built after. It had been ported after, quietly, lazily, by the same engineers who had begged her in Slack messages to just paste in your version, Maya, it's cleaner. They'd mistaken the house for the furniture. They still didn't know they were sitting on her foundation, or that underneath it was a tripwire tied to a key they'd never asked about. The clock ticked toward launch day. She followed the dev stream, combing through breadcrumbs. Product previews, beta snippets, code review screenshots accidentally posted by overeager interns. All of it confirmed what she already knew. They hadn't touched the validator. It was still in the system. Still calling verify owner key on that one specific feature, Derek's pet feature, the one she'd embedded the logic in because she knew he'd spotlight it. It was flashy. It involved real-time encryption verification at the client level. It was exactly the kind of thing that would go live in a demo to impress VC stooges in Patagonia vests. She didn't panic, didn't gloat. She baked a tray of brownies, took a walk, read a half chapter of a novel before realizing she hadn't absorbed a single word. Her hands were steady. Her heart, not so much. That night, she opened her dashboard, her private cloud shell, one connected to the cert. Everything sat idle. No access logs, no handshake attempts. Yet, she closed it, whispered not yet, and went to bed with the laptop beside her like a hunter sleeping next to a snare. The next day, her phone lit up with a push notification. Startup X Live product demo, tune in at 1 p.m. PST. Derek was already tweeting about it, complete with a photo of his ugly designer sneakers and a caption that read, "Big things coming. Can't stop, won't stop. Hash demo day hash disrupt everything." Maya just smiled and rechecked her kill switch code. She did nothing, waited, 1:03 p.m. PST. The live stream had already started late, classic Derek. Technical difficulties, the host had muttered. But the truth was, the nerves were already rippling beneath the startup's polished facade. Maya watched it unfold on her second monitor. She was eating a microwaved quesadilla, the kind that burns your mouth and still tastes like regret, but it felt poetic for the occasion. The host introduced Derek with a voice so enthusiastic it had to be paid for. "Please welcome Startup X's visionary CTO, Derek Langley." He walked onstage to synthwave music, clapping to his own beat, smug as ever in a blazer 2 sizes too tight. Behind him, the screen displayed live demo, the future of encrypted pipelines. Maya chewed, waited. Derek launched into his usual spiel. Scalable infrastructure, AI-ready tooling, multi-threaded trust scaffolding, a phrase Meyer invented as a joke in one of her code comments and now heard weaponized like gospel. The investors in the room were nodding. The live stream chat buzzed with startup cultists and tech reporters, hungry for something shiny. And then it happened. He hit the button. "Let me show you what happens when we engage live data integrity mode." Silence. Then a flash of white text over black on the display screen behind him. "Error. Unrecognized builder signature initiation, rejected core function lockdown." Enabled. The room went still. On the stream, Derek blinked once, then again, like someone who just realized the roller coaster had no brakes. He tapped something on the tablet. No response. The screen now displayed a spinning wheel of death, and behind it, a flashing red line. Signature mismatch contact, authorized owner someone near the front, probably a junior engineer, scrambled to unplug the demo unit. But it was too late. The core pipeline was already in lockdown mode. Other systems were pinging errors. Authentication timeouts, memory overflows. Every microservice connected to the demo endpoint was dropping like a house of cards in a wind tunnel. Live stream chat exploded. "WTF just happened? El Mao, is this part of the presentation? Nice alpha, bro. Wait, who is Maya?" Because now her name was on the screen, not loud, not highlighted, but in the scrolling audit log window someone had forgot to minimize before sharing the screen. User reference, Maya root signature key not verified, and that was it. The smoking gun. The validator was still there, exactly as she'd written it. The unverified key failed the ownership check. Her signature was embedded in the fallback logs, just as it had been from day one. She didn't code that in for ego. She coded it in for traceability, because Maya never built things she couldn't defend. Back in the conference hall, Derek was sweating bullets under the stage lights, voice cracking as he blamed a legacy library error and a rogue QA merge in the same sentence. Yanked the mic off and started whispering to a frazzled engineer who looked like he was 5 seconds from sobbing. Someone else shouted from the back, "Roll it back. Use the backup server." But the backup was cloned too. Maya knew because they'd copied her environment wholesale months ago, and she'd seen it in the Git log clone labeled Legacy Prod Sandbox. Same trap, same fail. The camera panned to a projector flickering with error messages, the kind only developers understand. But the investors didn't need to know code to see the truth. It was broken. Derek was broken, and the woman they called just a coder had just unplugged the whole circus without lifting a finger. Maya muted the stream, took one final bite of her cold quesadilla. Then she opened her cloud dashboard and watched the access logs tick upward, each one referencing the same failed handshake request. One after another, all saying the same thing: access denied, builder signature invalid. And silently, invisibly, she let it burn. 2 days after the demo collapsed like a Jenga tower during an earthquake, a courier dropped off a sealed envelope at the startup's glassy Soma headquarters. It wasn't addressed to Derek. It wasn't even addressed to the company. It was addressed to legal department, immediate attention. Inside, a binder, thick, quietly terrifying. The title page read, Intellectual Property Declaration Meyer R. The next 56 pages were lined with Git logs, timestamp commits, code diff screenshots, and a notarized declaration of authorship from Maya's attorney. Every function in question, every validator, every logic branch that powered their shiny, now defunct encrypted data pipeline. Each page landed like a punch. Commit timestamps dating as far back as April 2017, a full year before her employment contract even existed. Deployment logs from her personal GitHub. License headers. Even a photo of the original whiteboard sketch she'd done in her studio apartment, framed next to a 2019 tweet where she joked about writing paranoid security code in case capitalism tries to steal my soul. The logs from the demo, they matched her code, character for character. There was no backpedaling, no PR spin strong enough. The investors fled like rats off a flaming yacht. One pulled out mid-negotiation and posted a LinkedIn status. We value integrity in engineering. We regret the time wasted. Another filed a breach of contract claim for misrepresentation of IP ownership. The startup's legal team scrambled to draft apologies, but it was like trying to catch knives in the dark. The valuation dropped 60% in a single week. Derek didn't get fired. He got erased. His name was pulled from the website, his LinkedIn set to private. Anonymous Glassdoor reviews appeared overnight. CTO lacked fundamental knowledge of Stack and don't build your empire on stolen bricks. Rumor had it he tried to throw the engineers under the bus, but too many receipts led straight back to his Slack messages, his merge approvals, his refusal to listen. And Maya, she didn't tweet, she didn't gloat, she didn't leak the letter or grandstand about justice. Instead, she posted one thing: a screenshot of her verify owner key function, just the signature line with the caption, "Always sign your work." The tech community caught the scent instantly. Reddit lit up, dev forums exploded. Quiet DMs trickled in from other coders who'd seen their work taken, twisted, buried under names that didn't belong to them. Maya didn't respond to most of them. She went back to writing. A new repo. A clean slate. Only this time, the signature key wasn't hidden. It was front and center. When her lawyer called with news that the company had formally settled and agreed to remove all disputed code, her only response was a nod. No fist pump, no champagne, just quiet satisfaction. They had fired her like she was a bug in the system. She'd rewritten the system. They called her just a coder. But now she was the cautionary tale executives whispered about in panic when someone mentioned legacy code. She sat in her apartment. Same chair, same tea, watching the sun drop behind the skyline, and finally let the smirk come through. They owned everything I made at work, but they never asked where it began. Appreciate you sticking around, you legends of the break room. Subscribe for more chaos. Let's make your old managers spill their coffee in fear.